Hey, it's Teacher Kaye. Have you been working from home during this lockdown? How are you feeling? How's your voice? Let's get talking. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Kay and I'm a certified speech language pathologist. This lockdown has been very weird for many different reasons. We're in a crisis and all in all, it has brought about a lot of problems. And with that, something that I did not foresee would happen, but I've received so much more voice inquiries in the past few months than I have in my years of practice. I think that's because of the increased number of people who have been working from home. I've had people consult with me with regard to hoarseness or how they've been feeling more fatigued after a day of work, which they didn't used to experience in their regular work days when they used to physically go to work. When I analyzed everything that my clients talked about with regard to their problems or the new feelings that they've been experiencing, I realized that it's because working from home, working in front of a computer and doing video calls and teleconferencing for a majority of the work that they have to do, it has made people rely on their voice more than any other mode in communication. In face-to-face communication, and I talked about this in my first episode, there are so many modes which are written, gestural, and of course there's the spoken language. And then there's the very important body language, which we don't think about so much, but actually conveys so much more of our messages than actually what is just spoken. In video conferencing, we lose so much of the information that we used to be able to convey with body language. So now everything that we try to compensate with is our voice. So if we want to emphasize some points, we feel like we have to raise our voice when everyone is talking simultaneously in a video conference and you want to be able to cut through and be heard. Sometimes all of that make us feel like we have to exert more effort into speaking because it's harder to hear and see the feedback that we receive from our listeners. Do we know if they're listening? We probably miss the nods or just the eye contact that would tell us that, oh, I still have them engaged. But now it's like constantly using the voice to make it louder, to make it higher, to repeat things over and over. It's very tedious on our vocal cords. It's just like those times when my parents, when they used to be on the phone, how much they would compensate with their voice if it was a long distance call. If they would talk normally this loud, when it's a long distance call, they would be like this, hello! Hello! Oo, naririnig kita! It's because the way that you receive that feedback is how you would loop it back to the way that you communicate. Can't hear someone properly? The natural thought would be, well, then they probably can't hear me as well. And then so you're going to try to exert more effort into being heard when in fact, maybe they can hear you fine. So given that psychological component of what video calls do to us and our use of our voice, let's now go into a brief overview of how speech sounds are created, which actually I already mentioned a little bit in episode 5, but now I want to show you kind of the anatomy for caring for our vocal mechanisms. I'm sure you've heard so many pieces of advice with regard to how you can care for your voice, but I think the difference is understanding the rationale behind those tips so that you will be encouraged to apply them to your life a little more. Because I feel like awareness and information make for more intelligent decision making. Like, why will we apply this tip? Why will we use this advice? I will use it especially when I can understand why it's good for me. Though you've heard all the vocal care tips before, I'm hoping to shed light into why those are the top tips for caring for your voice. How do we make our speech sounds? First of all, in episode 5, I already differentiated that speech sounds are the sounds that we produce primarily to say a spoken language, and that's completely different from just any other sounds that our bodies can make as well, and that includes, for example, a kiss sound, or a fart, or a burp. And those things also come from our bodies, but they are not speech sounds. Speech sounds are created by the vocal cords. How does that work? The things that are needed to produce sound: breath and a vibrating membrane. We get our breath from our lungs. The lungs will store the air that we inhale. Eventually, we will exhale that breath, and when we exhale that breath, it passes through a tube, our air pipe, and at the top of that air pipe are our vocal cords. Now, vocal cords are situated this way. It is somewhere here, our larynx or our voice box. If we look at it from the top, then our vocal cords look like this. When they are at rest or when we are breathing freely, they open in like a V shape. So our vocal cords are made of muscle, and on top of that muscle, it is covered in a mucosa, which kind of reminds me of like a gelatinous substance, but very, very thin. I only give the gelatin analogy because if we think about poking a jello and it jiggles, right? It kind of reminds me of the action of our vocal folds when they are very moist. They jiggle and they vibrate, and they actually vibrate more than 100 times per second. That's amazing. Now, while it is the muscle, which is the body of our vocal cords, that makes the movements, whether it becomes tighter or looser, it is actually the mucosa on top of it that is responsible for producing the sound. It is when they vibrate together that speech sounds are produced. There's so much more involved, like the cartilages that the vocal cords are actually attached to. But just to understand those basics, that your breath will need to pass through your vocal cords, I'll use those two as a jump-off point to talk about how we need to keep them healthy, how we can make them function at their best. That's it for today. If you found this helpful, I would love if you could like this video and subscribe and share with your friends who you think may need it. Share it with your friends who are on voice conferences every single day. Check up on your friends, how they're feeling. I would love to hear from you in the comments section or on my Facebook or Instagram accounts at Teacher Kaye Talks. And that's it. Go take care of you this week and every other week, and happy talking.